Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us for the third Percussion Community Webinar of the season. My name is Caleb Rothy. I'm the Percussion Education Coordinator for WGI, and our special guest tonight is Rob Ferguson. Rob is the director and arranger and programmer for a number of ensembles, works with Matrix and Matrix Open are probably the programs that you know him best by, but also works with a number of scholastic programs as well, Norton High School, New Philadelphia, Central Crossings High School, and then also writes and does some programming work and consultation for a bunch of other groups. Rob is also the percussion education director for the OIPA circuit in Ohio. So, Rob, we're really excited to have you here with us this evening. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, great to be here. Thank you.
Rob and I are kind of game to talk about anything tonight. We have a couple of things that we want to discuss. I want to pick his brain on Matrix. We'll get to that in just a second. But if you've got questions, if there are things that are on your mind that you'd like to pick Rob's brain about or my brain about, we definitely want this to be as interactive as possible. So for everybody that's joining us tonight in your little dashboard over there on the side, there's a place where you can ask questions. So feel free to type out any questions you have, and we'll kind of take those as they come in. If you already know some questions that you'd like to ask tonight, now would be a great time to go ahead and type those things out, get them in the queue, so we can make sure that we get to those. We'll try to get to as many questions as possible, but no guarantees that we'll be able to get to all of those. We're going to try to run a tight ship tonight and keep us on a pretty good schedule. As I mentioned, Rob wears a lot of different hats in this activity, from running an independent ensemble and all the wonderful and all of the absolutely terrifying aspects that come with trying to run a beast like that. Not one, but two. And then is also a prolific arranger and programmer and designer. So he can talk about the logistics of a program. He can talk about design and programming. He can also talk about the logistics involved in organizing a circuit and trying to make sure that everything is structured to the best and to the nth possible degree to make sure that all the ensembles are getting a great experience and are really kind of taking a step forward year after year. So I'm excited to have Rob joining us this evening. Rob, if you don't mind, I'd love to jump in on Matrix. I've been a huge fan of the program for a number of years, stretching all the way back to the beginning of the ensemble. And then was so thrilled a couple of years ago when you added the second ensemble and branched out. I know that's a huge, daunting task, being a former founder and director of an independent group myself. I know how challenging that is. I can't even fathom doing two simultaneously. So I figured we could kind of pick your brain a little bit tonight on how it got started, what kind of brought the whole thing together, and when the program kind of started.
Yeah. Matrix started in 1999 under the umbrella of Collage Winterguard here in Akron. A friend of mine who's since passed away, Ray Boggs, approached me about adding a drum line to his guard, and we had met through marching bands, and so decided to try to do it. And then after a year, kind of realized that it made sense to go under our own umbrella, just with their support and everything else, and became Matrix. And it was three of us that started it. They were all local percussion teachers in schools, and none of our schools had enough support at that point to fully structure an organization, whether it comes to funding or the number of students in our programs that were interested in it at the same time. So myself, Brian Bennett, and Ron Graham, just three Northeast Ohio guys, got together, and Brian and I had been teaching together for years, and Ron and I had just met, and we decided to go off and do it. I mean, literally just we didn't talk until the end of marching band season, and we just kind of, the thing that back then you could probably do and survive, where now it just never work. Right. I mean, and we just jumped in that first year, and somehow it ended up coming out in open class, independent open, and made finals that first year somehow, with just hanging on by the skin of our teeth, begging and borrowing everything we could find, and without structure. I mean, to be totally honest with you, we functioned for quite a while without formal structure, just kind of living year to year, which again, it was a different age. It was a completely different age then. And so we were in open class in 99, 2000, 2001. And just literally we're hanging on by the skin of our teeth and rehearsing at high schools or churches or wherever, and borrowing gear from everywhere. Had no truck, had no gear of our own, everything was just kind of resources together. And then after 2001, it was just, we were financially in a place where, because we didn't structure at the beginning, that was not good. So we took 2002 off, or sorry, 2003 off, my fault, 2003 off, and came back in 2004 with the intent to be an open group again. And at the first audition, kind of looked at it, and one of my staff members and my friend said, "So we're World, right?" And the most daunting thing, and I've said it to Dawn before, is like I thought World and I thought Music City Mystique. That was what it was, and I've told Dawn that forever. He was the first guy to walk up and welcome me to the big show. I'll never forget that. But and just going, I'm like, we can't go World because it's Music City Mystique, and we can't at that point. And I remember thinking that, because they'd been there for so long, and they were the ones that were closest to us that we'd see at the regional, them and like Great Lakes Percussion at that point in our area. And you were seeing North Coast come out and Rhythm X, and we were just starting to kind of be in that fold of groups. Decided to not go to World Championships that year, which was the best decision we ever made, because it was in California in 2004. If we would have gone to World Championships, we'd have been gone. We'd have never made it back. We kind of decided, we had a bunch of our kids come back from 2002 and be willing to do it, which meant the world to us, even though we weren't going to World Championships. And then in 2005, Worlds came back to Dayton for us and was more financially feasible, and we became a world finalist that year. And have kind of been there ever since. This is year 19 for the World group. And then we talked about the open thing a number of times, or A things, and people go, "We should start this." I would say, "Yeah, that's a great idea. Who's running it? Where are we getting the facilities for that? Where's the equipment coming for that? How's that? I'm sure it's a great idea for you. I bet you would absolutely be the snare tech for that." But no disrespect to snare techs, but a friend of mine who does New Philadelphia High School, Ryan Reed, sat me down. It was 2015. We were 2 weeks out of finals, 3 weeks out of finals. And, by that point, I always feel like that time of year, some of the during the week stuff relaxes a little bit, because the show is hopefully by that point in the kids' hands a little more, and so the rest of it, all the get everything ready, is, a little more safe. And we sat down on a like a Sunday or Monday night. Anytime Ryan comes to me, he says, "Hey, let's talk about something. I know that there's something coming." And he said, "So I want to talk about this open thing." And I started off by going like, "Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about that." And he said, "Look, I'm willing to devote a bunch of my energy to it." And he'd been with our world team forever. He marched the group and had taught the front ensemble for years. And basically said, we have a lot of our own students coming out of our high schools, because we started Matrix to help the local area school programs that didn't all, first of all, it didn't all have a place to have an indoor line. Since then, the indoor scene in the area has gotten much better, and Ohio in general is stronger. But at the same time, we had students in lots of schools we know that didn't have their own indoor programs, or kids were coming out of our A-class programs in the area that weren't quite ready to make the world line, because a lot of the world line guys are now all drum corps guys and stuff like that. So we kind of lost track through growth. We'd lost our mission a little bit, for what we started with. And so his whole thing was like, we have too many kids that are our students coming out of our high school programs that want to march Matrix, but they come out of high school, they come and audition, and they're like a year away, but we don't have a place to help them specifically get that way. Some great friends of ours, Capital City Percussion, great friends of ours, Cap City now, I guess you should say. They had a great organization they'd built, but they had just moved into World. So it's like, okay, well, there's another not open ensemble or A ensemble for them to go to. So we just decided in 2016 to think about it. And then I'll not to be corporate, but Chris Hankus and Jeff Mulvihill at Mapex, they were the biggest thing. It's like, how do we begin to handle it? We were fortunate to have a facility at that point that the city of Akron was helping us with, that we would have never taken that leap without. We had a facility for a couple of years there that the city of Akron was helping us with. So we knew it would be a little tight, it would be kind of chaotic, but we could survive it. My board was willing to not fire me. And they were willing to listen. And then the guys, all of our companies, just being willing to say, "Hey, look, we'll help you somehow. We'll, like, if you're gonna do it, we got your back. We'll help you try to figure it out." That was, every year at finals, I always, when they're out, if they're in the open lot, I'm like, "Hey, you did this, right? You know that we're here because you were willing to, to throw your hat in the ring." So we were just blessed that way. I mean, And then, and since it's, like, when we bought our second semi-trailer, it took us till 2015 to get it to be able to afford a semi-trailer for the World Group. You know what I mean? So, and then, the second year in existence, the Open Group gets a semi-trailer, and the World guys are like, wait a minute, shouldn't they have to wait?
Right.
But the cool thing is, we initially had never planned for both groups to rehearse in the same place. We wanted to be separate. That first year, it just didn't work out. We had to be in the same place. It creates some headaches for sure. Creates some like gym time things and how do we facilitate all that. But it's pretty awesome that those kids are in the same place at the same time. And we operate on separate schedules. We operate with a largely separate staff. Some of the staff overlaps. The design team overlaps. But at the end of the day, the kids know each other. Like Friday night, we sit them all down and we talk to them together most Friday nights. So there is state of the organization, not the ensemble, which is kind of cool. And just how our world members were about it. They were very animate when we were going to do it. Our multi-year vets, that like the jacket be the same. So the little things that I hadn't even thought about, but there wasn't a separation of the two groups. That if it's Matrix, it's Matrix, which was really cool because it could be the other way around. They could be like, oh wait, so we're going to have to share gym time, or we're going to have to, it was just the opposite. It was the opposite, which has been maybe one of the most rewarding things. Is like now and then when we see them all together, like state finals, we shoot a picture together at the show, and you're going, oh my God, I can't. The Saturday morning of our first contest, I was down in the open gym watching the open group just finish their run through, and I went running into the world gym, and they're like at the beginning of the ballad, and I just sat down and was like, I can't even believe this is happening. I mean, truly, just you can relate. So, but it's been helpful at times because what works with one works with both. There's times it's problematic because it's more of everything. The CDL driver suddenly is another CDL driver.
Right.
The gym space is like, now it's one thing. Okay, we need room for 50 people. No, now we need room for 100 people. But at the same time, a lot of it helps because, as we're run by the same board of directors. I function as a director of both groups. From a design perspective, we're tag teaming some things, so we can share some resources. Like our open team last year had a video wall, which they would not have had. We wouldn't have, with an independent open, probably gone out and bought a video wall. But we had one from the world team. They weren't using it, so that's kind of it. It's more stuff that who knows, next year's World Line may use open backdrops from 2 years ago. It's like just stuff that you can, any given year, who needs what, between laptops and stuff and gear and tools. And it's as a director, those things start to add up and really matter.
Absolutely.
So
well, adding that second ensemble is not as challenging as starting an ensemble from scratch.
No.
But as you mentioned, as soon as, you get one thing dialed in for the world group, like the first group, like, hey, we've got this awesome truck driver. He takes us wherever we need to go, whenever we need to go there. We need a second one of those. Like, that's so difficult because there's not two of all of those things that you need. So
right. And you tax the people. That's the thing I know is like my board president is a saint. She's amazing, but that she suddenly is dealing with twice as many emails, twice as many contracts that she's taking care of, twice as many, WGI housing is twice as confusing of like, so which group's going to be in which place, and then how, we got to get the meals taken care of, but they're not at the same place at the same time,
Right. Twice as many things can go wrong at any given time. Yeah.
We travel together, so show-wise, we tend to do the same shows, except for World Champion. We can function completely separately at this point. But at WGI, it's like Wednesday night we do a run for each other, and then it's like high fives, get it done. That's that's what it is. The guys all just hugging and going, let's kill it, and and we'll try to see each other on Saturday. But that's the next time we do.
Let's talk about some of those logistics really quick. A couple of people have reached out to me in the last couple of months since we announced we were going to be doing these webinars. Some people have reached out. They are independent directors of and independent open ensembles, not necessarily world-class programs, but they're just trying to get a feel for how does this work elsewhere. So the first question I want to ask you is, how do you guys go about securing your practice facilities? Like, where do you rehearse? What do those arrangements look like? one of the people that reached out to me said, how do I go about getting free rehearsal facilities for my independent group? So I'm just kind of wondering what advice
Yeah.
you might have.
I have a rule for all things with trying to get something for free. I mean, whatever it is, if it's a truck driver, if it's schools, like it's either about money or relationships. And it's not to say that when you have a relationship that money never comes in, but like now and then, if you want to start cold calling schools, you're not going to find a school. I mean, God bless you, but I don't think you're going to find a school that's going to be like, oh yeah, this is such a great thing. You should come in and inhabit our school and stay there. And by all means, we should bring a liability into our school, because that's, we're a rolling liability as independent groups. And today's day and age, it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
You have to have a relationship. You got to start a relationship. For us, we want to have a relationship with the music program. If we can help the music program, if it's like, hey, can we use this space for whatever, this amount of time, and then and maybe we'll just buy one of our vibraphones at the end of the season and donate to the music program, and instead of like paying random other fees. Can we do that? Now and then you'll find an administrator that will. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to sit here after 19 years and go, hey, this is how you do it. I still don't know how. I mean, it is literally a brand new ball game every year. I mean, we have not had the perfect stable thing probably ever. We're currently working out of a church that's been really awesome to us in like a small town south of Akron, where both groups are in there, and then we're moving trucks to a high school on a Sunday. We're storing our semis on this farmer's property out in the middle of nowhere and paying him like $100 a month to, store our semis and honestly get our semi trailers close enough with two groups where one tractor and one driver can jockey two trailers. So the open group gets done a little before World, and those trailers get jockeyed. Just that alone to save a second tractor rental, a second driver, a second set of fuel, is huge. I mean, by the time the season's over, it's thousands. If you can try to set up a long-term relationship, it's always useful. You're going to have to bend. I think one of the hardest things now is to stay at a school. It's one thing to rent rehearsal space, is another thing to sleep there, because the liability thing is so much, obviously the insurance WGI asks us to or requires us to carry helps the $1 million worth of liability and all that. Those are always going to be a necessity to get those, in the door to school. The band director can't get you in. That's the thing to learn. It's like a lot of times, you'll have, I'll have a student, they'll say, hey, I tech the bass line at Podunk East High School, and I'm sure we could probably rehearse there. And I go, well, okay. Because I'm sure, but by the time it's got to go to the band director, and the band director's got to go to the principal, the principal's got to get, support from the superintendent. By the time all that happens, it may not be as simple. It's a different thing occasionally for like a band director to go, okay, for this group to be here this weekend, the band director has to stay there all weekend. There's schools where that's definitely the case. And for them to do that one weekend and their kids come in and watch rehearsal, that's super. They're usually into it if they can. They're not going to be able to do that. They're not going to stay all weekend at the school, 7 weekends,
right?
Typically. So I mean, I think it's just a relationship. And to know that some of the schools, I think there'll be an administrator change. So like you have a great relationship with the school, and then a principal will move, and there'll be a new principal come in, and they'll have a kind of a different take on how open they want the school to be or how closed they want the school to be. And I think that's especially again in the climate we're in right now with schools and everything going on in our country. I think that we got to be aware that the administrator outlook changes from time to time, or the school board's outlook, even just the school board supporting it. If you can create a way to be involved in the community, I think that helps. That's the hardest thing. For us, it's, we've moved a little bit out of the city of Akron because the community is so large. It's harder to be connected to a city versus a smaller town that we can hopefully help get involved in. But, we still do, we do the Akron Santa Parade every year, not for money, but just to help be connected in that community. So at some point, to hopefully help just people know who we are. So if we really need something, that Akron Public Schools will help us out for a day here or something like that. And so you do some community things if you can too.
How about, since you've got two ensembles and you guys travel to regionals fairly frequently, how do you guys go about securing rehearsal facilities when you're traveling to events?
We try to.
that would be outside of your normal home
Oh yeah,
network. And
yeah,
so
yeah,
how do
yeah.
you guys handle that?
Yeah, the closest regional we have is 3.5 hours. So we travel 3.5 hours or 5 hours for the regionals we go to usually. Again, relationships. If we find a place we were last year and it was great, we try to go, what can we do to get it again? What can we do to hang on to it? Sometimes, more often than not, it involves some money. I mean, these days to make that work. A lot of it's friends. I mean, do you have connections in that area? Like if we were suddenly going to go somewhere else, if we're going to go to Virginia to a regional, I'm going to think about, okay, I know the guys at South County down there. So I'm going to call, he's a former student. So I'm going to call one of my former students who's there. I'm going to call, who do I know? And I think in today's day and age, if we're not careful, we put it on Facebook and say, like, I always think, get on the phone with the people actually get on the phone with somebody, not just the Facebook blast of who can help me.
Right.
I mean, I'm not going to lie. In the 11th hour, when something goes sideways, it's whatever you got to do. But I think that, that for me, it's looking at, I've got friends in Indianapolis, Derek Shannon, who lives out there. So it's like, if I'm having indie problems in Indy, I reach out to Derek and say, hey, Derek, or I reach out to Jeff Huffman over there and say, hey, do you know anybody? And then a lot of times I go, hey, I don't, my space is tied up, but I know somebody who teaches over here and they might be so you kind of trace that network until you try to find something. And then hopefully if it works out well, you can try to secure it again for the future.
So there's no secret sauce to it. You just have to be on the phone and call people and barter and sell yourself and all that. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, and I think, I've been fortunate. I have an administration team that's trying to help with some of those things now. So I'm not doing as much with that second group. It was a necessity, honestly. So I could focus a little more on the group, the kids, the show, those things. And some guys are doing some of the heavy lifting of that, on the phone, making connections. But I still have to set those connections up because a lot of those guys are people that I've known for years. If I'm bringing Matrix to Southern California, I'm calling you. I mean, that's what I'm doing. I'm calling you. I'm calling, the guys at Chino. I'm calling, I'm like, who help me out, point me in the right direction. I think, beyond that, I think I don't know how else to do it. It's just that. The good news is there's a bigger network now than when you and I first got involved. There's more people, there's more schools, and there's a greater awareness to what we do. So, I mean, and the regionals are in the same places. So it helps. There's more people around there that are going to go, yeah, they know what this thing is,
Right.
So, but more often than not these days, it does involve some cash. That's it's like, that's just part of the budget now to make that work.
Yep. Yeah. And one of the things, savvy directors are going to budget for this. You can't start an independent percussion ensemble on a $10 budget. Like that, the finances of our activity.
Facilities are everything. Like without facilities, forget your show. It doesn't matter what your show is. Doesn't matter. Right. Doesn't matter what your
they're so amazing.
But we got the tenor tuning. It doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. If you don't have facilities, it doesn't matter.
Right.
And a Scholastic group, you have in the worst day, you still have the band room. The worst day, you still have got a hallway to get your front ensemble in. I mean, no matter how jacked the gym space might get, you still got something.
Right. You're still allowed to be there no matter what.
I have woken up many Friday mornings to a text message that went, "Your whole world is upside down."
Yep. I've been there.
Yeah. I mean,
show of hands.
Yeah. That's the membership card to Independent Director Club. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit more about traveling with the group, but let's talk about housing facilities. Just tell me, for Matrix, when you guys travel out to a regional, are you guys usually trying to stay at a school, or do you put the ensembles up in a hotel? What do you guys normally do?
We try schools. So, I mean, we've been fortunate at Dayton Regional forever. We've been at schools. If we were in Dayton Regional, in Indy Regional, we're in schools at some point, sleeping at a school. We've done hotels off and on for world championships. We found a really awesome, like a campground, church camp kind of thing to host a bunch of drum lines that we just got connected with. Actually, one of my high schools found it and used it for the regional and was like, hey man, we should check this out. And then anywhere, you just get it anywhere you can. And now we'll go there forever, hopefully. But we try to not do the hotels, not because the one thing I like not being hotels is like, they're all together. Mm-hmm. And for me, like those regional weekends, especially they're so important if the guys can hang out. And a lot of times, I mean, depending on your rehearsal situations, right now Matrix is staying together. Like tomorrow night we'll be housing at a place together for a rehearsal weekend. But for a lot of years we're in local housing, so guys are stuffed in houses of alumni and current members and staff. And so they become, if you're not careful, they know these 10 people really well, but they don't know the bottom bass drummer because they're not staying at the Vibe House, and so those regional weekends I think are just so crucial for the ensemble to be together, and just to break down the natural clicks that happen in sections. I mean, and across the two ensembles, even if we can, if just them getting a chance to actually hey, how was your run today? Because the world line didn't see the open line. They were unloading while, they're like, hey, how was the run today? Forget what we had to say. They can the two snare lines can hang out and talk about the warm-up room.
Right.
And I think that, so for me, if we can put them in one place, it sounds stupid. Less uniforms get left at the housing sites and stuff like that in a hotel, you know what I mean? But you see them all, everybody's awake, when you say good morning Matrix, you look at everybody, who's still sleeping, who's up, who has a uniform. If somebody's walking out, there's a uniform laying there, somebody grabs it and says, whose is this? Versus you get to the show site and you're like, oh my God, there's a uniform missing,
Yep, absolutely.
So I just enjoy that if we can.
How about in terms of travel for the group? We talked about lodging, but you were saying you go to regionals that are 3.5, 5 hours away. How does the membership get there? Do you guys rent a bus and go? Do you do rental vans? Is it a carpool situation? What's your norm?
We did vans for a number of years, a long time ago. We haven't done anything like that in a lot of years. It's all carpool now because our membership comes from so many different places. So if we go to Indy next weekend, we'll go to Indy. So that's 4.5, 5 hours from us, from Akron. But so we have a bunch of our membership that drives from let's say Pennsylvania. But the membership from Indianapolis doesn't want to drive to Ohio to drive back. The membership, we've got guys from Chicago, they're going to go straight. The Michigan guys are going to go down to it. They're not going to come to us. And then, so we've just learned that, I mean, the carpools change. So guys drive and meet and then drive and meet. But we've learned that if we rented a bus, it would only work for a piece of the group anyways. So now if we were going to go, if we're going to Nashville, then we're going to rent a bus and pick people up along the way, probably,
Yeah.
But we're fortunate where we live that we've got a couple things that are drivable from where we're at.
And when you guys come out to California next year, I'm sure that'll be on a bus. Or something.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be on a plane. You'll have the bus waiting there. It should be fine.
Sure. I'll gas it up. Ready to go. I feel like we covered Matrix pretty well. Before we kind of change gears and talk about some other things, is there anything else Matrix related that you wanted to kind of share with everyone? Okay.
No, I mean, I think we covered it.
All right. Neil sent in a couple of questions, and I kind of wanted to tackle these. For everybody that's tuning in live, in the handouts area, I threw a copy of the effect music sheet. So if you want to grab that and open that up on your computer, that might be kind of helpful to have in front of you. These questions, there's going to be 2 of them, and we'll kind of tackle the first one first and then move on to the second one. These have to do with judging, but then also designing and programming and arranging and things like that, but specifically around the concept of creativity. And I thought this was fantastic. So I'll kind of read the first question and then we'll dive into these things. The first one that Neil asked was this. Explain how creativity is scored and acknowledged, since it's on the sheets, or not when groups are choosing to use music and visual from previous productions, sometimes in exact duplication of the original show. Is this design choice a factor in scoring? Should it be? Should it be a consideration in unit directors' programming choices? I thought this was great, and it's one that I've kind of talked about with some people before, but I'd love to kind of get it out there on the webinar tonight. So I grabbed the effect music sheet, and I just want to point out that if you're looking at this or the effect visual sheet, you'll find the term creativity on both of those sheets twice. Creativity shows up both in overall effect and it shows up in the music effect side and then also the visual effect side. So I just kind of wanted to parse through this definition so that we're all in the same place in terms of what it means. For our activity, creativity is defined as the originality, uniqueness, and imagination infused into the overall program and presentation. So when we're talking about overall effect, it's the originality, uniqueness, and imagination about the overall holistic performance. When we talk about it in music effect or in visual effect, it's again originality, uniqueness, and imagination, but now infused into the musical program or into the visual program. So the question was specifically about what if I'm performing a show that has been performed before. I bought it, but it's now a program that people have seen. It's a soundtrack people have heard. It's maybe a very similar visual design. Maybe I even purchased the costumes that were used before. How does that factor in? I will say that when we look at the sheets, one of the things we ask the judges to do is to treat each of those terms as a consideration. So if you're looking at the effect sheet, the judge would be asked to consider and discuss and respond to the program, the creativity, the communication, the engagement, so on and so forth. But creativity is certainly one of those things that we would want the judge to talk about. Is this original? Is this unique? Is this imaginative? Both in just the pure music and visual components, and then also in the overall. If I'm a judge and I'm evaluating something that I've seen before, that may impact a little bit of the uniqueness and the originality and the imagination. But I don't think this always necessarily applies to just performing shows that I might have seen before. This is also true if you just pick a theme that we've seen before. So my classic terrible example for this is a robots show. I've seen robots shows so many times. But if you were able to take a robot show, like the concept of robots, and you're able to do something new with it, if there's some originality, if there's uniqueness, if you have a new take on it that I've never seen before, then it may be the most creative thing I see out of the whole entire day.
Maybe because of that, even that, because you expect something. I mean, it's one thing that when we see something we expect, we're like, oh, I know what this is going to be, and then somebody twists it around on you. I think there's times where like the idea, maybe the idea we've seen 1,000 times, but the take on it, the presentation is different. Sometimes that may be the most memorable thing you see.
Yep. I will say this, sometimes I see shows where it's literally just the same version of something that I saw a previous season or a couple of seasons ago. And in that case, it definitely, if there's nothing different about it, if there are no changes, if it's just basically a facsimile of what I've seen before, that is going to definitely impact the creativity. That's going to definitely impact the uniqueness and the imagination. Now, there may be some things that the performers are doing that might tweak it and make it look a little bit different because no two ensembles are identical. But in terms of the planned events and effects, in terms of the storyline and the through line and the horizontal development, that definitely may impact the creativity. If I'm purchasing a show that's been done before, I'm going to pick up some positives. The range of effects is already going to be really strong because it's a show that's been vetted. It's one that's already gone through the course of the season where they've already gotten a season's worth of feedback about where pacing problems exist and where there needs to be more diversity and things like that. So there are inherent advantages to buying something that's like totally fleshed out and totally works. So I may get some brownie points for those things, like for sidestepping those potential pitfalls. But the trade-off is I may take a hit with some of the uniqueness and originality and inventiveness in the program. I think the key for a director that's considering this as a programming choice is to think about buying something that maybe has been done before, certainly for the budget conscious ensemble or somebody that's getting into the activity for the first time and doesn't have in-house designers and arrangers ready to go. I think it's a great idea. I think as the ensemble director, one of the things you would want to do is to take that and think of it as raw material and say, okay, now my job is to figure out how to twist this. How do I make this unique? How do I put our own little spin on this so that it feels like ours, rather than us doing as I mentioned before, a facsimile of something that we've seen before. Rob, what do you think on that, about that?
I mean, I absolutely agree. I think, the other component too is, and obviously we can talk about this later on, but like, what is your goal? If your goal is to be highly competitive at the national level, then those components of that sheet, the creativity, the imagination of that, it has to be a huge consideration on your point. If your goal is, if I've got a high school program starting up down the road who's never had a high school program, and it's a young director and they're working on a limited budget and his kids have never done intro before, I would say, okay, you know what, you need something where you as a director are not distracted by the programming and the production, everything else, because the goal of your program this year is not necessarily to be nationally competitive. It's the kids have an awesome experience with something, like you said, that has been vetted, that this thing is going to work. You can focus on teaching, because we all know that, like, as we are tweaking and producing, our kids are learning, but it's different than when we are, like, literally it's all about the development of the student. where the whole thing is that. So I think that's where the pre-written show, while it may be, again, it may not peak the meters all the way to the top on creativity, it provides a different kind of educational vehicle that's a little more airtight, a little more smooth sailing for somebody who's just trying to get a program off the ground. I mean, or let's just go, okay, I'm going to go to a school that, you know, I've never been to before, and we're going to try to start a program from nothing, from ground up. Maybe it's just even me taking a show that I've already done before and go, I'm going to make some adjustments because the kids are different and the group is and the strengths and weaknesses are different. But if I want to just focus on these kids playing better and having a great experience and everything being super smooth for them, then the uniforms being done, the floor being done, and all of those things, let me focus on just like more hours with the kids moving and playing. Where if we're gonna go in and like create the body thing and try to pace this out, that's gonna take some time. And there's education in that, but it's a program at a different level. So I think it's a question of what are your goals? What are your end season goals?
Absolutely. And another great piece of advice kind of on this note for any young aspiring arrangers or designers that are on here tonight, if you're teaching your own group for the first time ever, as Rob mentioned, I'm just going to concentrate on the teaching this year and not worry about the other stuff. Yeah. One of the best things you can do is buy one of those prepackaged shows and really use that as an opportunity to do a little bit of program study and score study yourself and go, hey, I bought this thing from, you know, a renowned arranger and programmer, and I now have their work, and I'm going to go through and analyze this thing. Like, why does this work? How does this work? How can I use this to hone my craft as an aspiring arranger? And maybe you do that a couple of seasons, you might even be better for that coming out the other side. I know a bunch of ensembles that have started that way, bought shows from maybe different arrangers and different, designing houses for the first, 3 or 4 years of the program. And then year 5, they take all of that knowledge, all that work experience they've gained, and they start designing themselves. And that's how programs take off. And we get new voices in the activity and all those amazing other things. So that's awesome. Hey, so Rob, here's the follow-up question that Neil had specifically for you. Okay. He said, as someone who arranges for so many groups, how do you bring creativity to your arrangements and stay away from recycling material or concepts?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, for myself and the team of guys I work with on a regular basis, I mean, let's start with concept. Some people already have a direction they want to go, and I think that's always helpful. I personally love if you say, man, I've always wanted to do a show about robots. I go, okay, let me take that and see where we go with it. That initial seed. Anytime that the programs we're working with have a seed, or they really want to do a show, they want to do something like dark and intense, or they want to do something that's like way more pop techno. Any kind of avenue helps. It helps it not be the same. That's number one. Number two is branding. So one of the things that I like to talk to a program about is, if it's a brand new program that we're going to custom design something for, it's going, okay, let's talk about 3 years. I mean, we're not signing a 3-year deal, but we're in an activity where, like, I mean, I want to believe that Matrix has a brand. It doesn't mean we do the same thing every year. MCM has a brand. Pulse has a brand. Cavaliers Indoor have a brand. Rhythm X has a brand. I mean, we get that, which I think helps us. I mean, Apple has a brand. Apple will keep stretching it, but it's always going to be Apple, which is one of the things that help us know where to go to get what we want. And I think that, so we start to look at what is the right thing for the given program. For us, a lot of times we brainstorm concepts. I mean, I have a base camp that we all use. There's a bunch of random concepts. A lot of them are just like a name or some random tune or some image off Google that one of our guys was like, this is cool. This would be an awesome floor. We have no idea what the show is. We just throw it up there. Right. And then what you start to do as programs come in, you go, does one of these things fit a program? So from a concept standpoint, if it helps if they have some kind of nugget of something they want to work from, and they also have to love it. We have to like it. They have to love it. I have to be so intimately in love with the Matrix show to work in it every day, versus a program that we're not in every single day. We have to really enjoy it, but the people boots on the ground have to be so passionate about what that concept is. So it helps if they're involved in it. The writing itself, I think it's trying to trying to force yourself at times into not. I mean, I don't do any of the ghostwriting thing. I try to, we all have things that sound like us. You can listen to something and be like, that's John and Ian, but because there's a sound that Paul Cincino and the Box Six has, which is cool. I mean, I think there's a sound that we have. It's like, a friend of mine be like, that's a Rob Ferguson lick. It's like we all have it. DCI, right. We all have it. So I don't think you can escape that completely. And I think theoretically that's good as long as we force ourselves to keep trying new things. For me, a lot of it's just making sure you don't push Command C, Command V. In the same piece of music I do, if that pattern, we're gonna keep that marimba texture going, sure, but not show to show. I mean, I have once in a while, I've had it where like, I'll write an impact in a high school show, and then, all of a sudden, state finals be like, oh my God, that hit is almost like the hit in the Matrix show. Oh my God. Because you get hung up on, it'll be like a stylistic thing I'm hung up on right now. Like I'm on this quarter note triplet kick, or I'm in this, I'm in this rough kick, or I'm in, whatever, you gravitate towards something. I think that's a composer thing. I mean, we hear that in every pop music, classical music, we hear that. I think it's crucial to try to live to what the brand of that program needs, and help them try to create that brand. Which is not about what we want. It's not about, ultimately it's their show too. Once we're done with it, once we write it, it's like, we'll stay involved in it, but it's theirs. I mean, it's like, if you want to alter it. It's, because you're the boots on the ground. I change my own stuff 24/7. So you should not be afraid to change something if it needs to happen. It's your kids. I know with the Matrix Storyline, like this is going to be okay in 2 weeks, or this is not going to be okay in 2 weeks. I need to rewrite this. This is not right. Your kids. So I think it's almost that too. It's us as designers working with the people in house to try to make sure that the identity of it sounds like us because that's theoretically what they hired us to do. But it has an identity that's unique from the next group that we wrote.
Yeah.
Tonalities and stuff like that help. I mean, again, a lot of it's just, trying not to get into a niche of the same artists. If 6-year shows all have Justin Timberlake in it, it's hard for it to not,
Yeah, you can't break out of that.
Yeah, I mean,
I think for me, one of the keys on that particular question is if you're truly doing arranging, which is different than composing. We'll kind of circle back to that in a second. But if you're arranging, picking high quality source material from the jump is crucial, that you have something that is fertile and gets you excited about interacting with that music. That's going to help you maximize your creativity with the arrangement. If you're listening to a piece of music and you're excited about trying to bring that to life in a unique way or for a unique set of instrumentation, you're halfway there. That's going to kind of take care of itself. And then just your job then is to be in service to the music and figure out, how do I bring this to life using the tools that I have at my disposal here. If you're not turned on,
there are times, I'm not gonna lie, as an arranger, you start with, when you're laying the show out, you're like, this tune's going to be great.
Yep.
And I've had it where I had it this year with Matrix World this is what the closer is going to be. And I've known it forever. And then I got time to write it. I'm like, what am I going to do with this? I love the tune, but what am I really going to do with this in our world? And I found I wasn't as turned on as I was about it in August. And so we just changed it. It's like, if I'm not turned on at the beginning, if the first date's not exciting, it's probably not going to be real great on the date. It's probably not going to get to date 3. I gotta love it when I start, because at some point I'm probably not going to like it when I'm working on it in the middle of it at some point.
Yeah.
So, I got to be in love at the beginning. So, I mean, a lot of times if it starts to feel redundant, then, one of my answers is like, let's just look for a different tune. Maybe, let's look for something else.
Yeah. And there's no shame. I've done this before where I had a tune picked out and I go to start working on it. It's not fitting. It's not right for whatever reason. I still love the piece of music. I'm going to hold on to that. And a couple of times I've come back to that a couple years later and I'm like, now I'm ready to do this. And if you're truly into art and geeky stuff, like there's a documentary out there about Spielberg, and he is collecting all the time ideas for movies that he wants to do. But sometimes we'll take it and go, this is my idea for 8 years from now. I'm not ready to make this movie. I got to let it marinate. And like his timeline is 8 years out before he's ready to do that kind of stuff. So, you know, our activity doesn't have to be any different. We kind of have this annual cycle that we get into. But you can take ideas and go, I'm going to hold on to this. This one's going to be special, and I'm not quite ready to do it yet. I'm going to save it for when it feels right.
And I think, I'm not going to lie, Caleb, with some of, we were talking about this before we got on, you know, on the broadcaster, but it was like, there are some tunes I've done. I can think of a couple of that I did 6 or 7 years ago in a show that I'm like, there's even a show or two that like macro concept. I'm like, I want to do this again in 4 years because of where the activity, I mean, we would have never thought to do things back then that we would do now. Oh my God, never. And I go, if I can do that again with what I mean, again, talk about creativity. I can take the macro concept and I would go down a completely different road. Oh my God, what I would do knowing what I know now, just older, wiser, experienced, made more mistakes since then. So I think there's that too, of just know what you'll do with the same thing in a different environment. You know, I mean, and where this activity is going, we're so influenced by each other. I mean, there's no way around it, that like, where is this going to be in 4 years? I mean, like what the things that we will naturally gravitate toward. You know, we can go back 10 years and none of us were thinking about going down on our knee. I mean, like that would have been like groundbreaking. And now we're like, okay, of course we're going to be in the ground. Of course. That's an obvious tool to us now. But some of those shows we did back then, those weren't obvious tools to us.
No,
we would have never been like on our knees playing. That would have never happened. So I think that's the other part, is where we approach that in our own development as designers and the activities development as a whole. Like, bring it back. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. There's at least 2 shows I can think of right now that someday you're gonna be like, hey, that was one of those shows you were talking about.
That's all right. I look forward to it.
It will come back. Yeah,
man. All right. Himanshu sent in this question. He says, how did Rob get started writing for other groups? Did he write any books for free? And how did he get his name out there? So, Rob, let's go on the Wayback Machine. How did you get started doing this? And how did it kind of pick up steam and turn into what you're doing now?
You know, I have like the strangest resume to do what I do of anybody on the planet. You know, I never marched in a competitive marching band. I grew up in a show band, and you know, I'm gonna have degrees in percussion. So I started writing for the high school I graduated for, and I was doing it for free. I mean, I was getting paid like, you know, like $200 to teach and write, you know, or whatever it was, you know. So I was doing that. I want to say the first time, I think the first time I ever wrote for somebody else that I wasn't like teaching, was a friend of mine from way back, Rick Brown, from way back, that he was writing some stuff, and he ran a drum shop, a really successful drum shop here in the Midwest. And we just got behind. He was like just drowning in work and everything. And he called me up and said, hey man, would you be interested in writing like a pit book I was like, yeah, I'm going to write for something, you know. And I did it for cheap, for sure. You know, I didn't care. I was going to write for somebody that was not my own group. It was like, you know, oh my God, this is it. And so that's where it started. I mean, beyond that, I don't know. I mean, yeah, I think a lot of it, you got to be willing to do some work for not a lot of money. I mean, you know, the first real successful high school indoor art program that I started, we worked for free for a couple of years, like all the way through, because we wanted to do it. It was an earlier time, you know. It was 2001. There wasn't a huge, you know, this is what it is. There wasn't schools down the road that they go, oh, well, this is what everybody does. You know, we were one of the only, you know, programs in our area doing it. There wasn't budget for it. So if we were going to take a bunch of money to do it, then we wouldn't have been able to do it. So we just kind of said, all right, we're going to suck it up and do it for free for a minute. And that's what we ended up having to do to get our own program started. And to sort of get your name out there, your own program. I owe all my drum corps career to Matrix. Like everything I do in drum corps, I owe to the fact that, like, in 1999, we decided we're going to start this drum line out of our garage. Like it strictly was, I didn't get my name nationally known by traveling some marketing route with it. It was completely trying to figure out how to do with Matrix and devote our energy to that. I mean, Matrix is passion for me. It's not money. Like we don't get paid. We do it because we want to do it, and we do it because it's also a billboard for what we do, in terms of that. So I think that's, yeah, you have to get involved in your own thing, and learn how to develop your own craft and your own style and your own successes in your own thing. And then people will notice that at some point. I think that's the easiest way.
Yeah, I think, experiencing some success, writing for one group and having it be good and having them be successful. I'm not saying win everything, but, like it
No.
sounds good and people enjoy it, and the students are having a great experience and people enjoy listening to the music. That's the way to get started. And you do one of those, and then, then somebody else is interested. And now you've got two of those. And I think that's kind of a similar story for most people that have been doing this for a while. Is it started with one program, usually your own program. For many
Yeah.
of us, one that you started from scratch with nothing, that you did for free just because somebody was going to let you write and teach, and then it
Well,
grows from
and
there.
I think the other thing, my advice to anybody younger getting involved in it is, this is going to sound like an old man thing to say, but don't be in a hurry to start to write for a bunch of groups and get beyond your own group. I mean, I love the fact I get to work with a bunch of groups? I do. Do I love the fact I get to make my life in this activity? I do. I miss that I had one high school. I miss that, like, a high school line where I know every single kid and I know their mom and their dad, and I was there building the props, and that, like, I wasn't like popped in for the show, high fives in the warm room, catch the show and run to the next group. I miss the days of just like, okay, I'm going to the region with like my group. I do miss that. I mean, so don't be in a hurry to don't forget about the group that got you started too quickly. Don't be in a hurry to just do a bunch as fast as you can, because it's still, I think, this is the most special time you're going to have is with that group, whatever that group is. If it's a school, if it's independent, whatever it is, like that thing where you sunk your whole life into it and you just sweat and bled over every last note. And you knew every kid, and that it was like you lived and died by all the successes and all their failures and all those things. I think that's, man, just one of the most valuable things in terms of development, and I think even creatively, as you keep going, you need that foundation, to not just start to write and write and write and write just to do it.
Yep. Perfectly stated, and we'll leave that concept there. You can tell Rob, the way that he speaks with passion, that he's really invested in this, and I would absolutely echo everything he said about concentrating on your program, that one where you're going to make your mark and kind of have your signature. On a kind of a related note, we talked a lot about where you get your inspiration and creativity for arranging and things like that. Same person was wondering where you find inspiration for shows, like thematically, programmatically. We touched on this a little bit, but I'm wondering if you can talk about how your design process gets started just a little bit.
I'll take Matrix, or just because that's a brand that what we feel and what we really care about matters. What I really am driven with what matters versus some other groups where it's like, if you're the director and I'm writing for you, I have to really think about you. For me, the Matrix World thing has to be personal. Like, I made that rule about 4 or 5 years ago. You can see it in the design process for us, like where I went, it has to be personal. It has to be something that I legitimately care about. Where I let go of going, what do I do to be competitive, or what do I do to fit the sheets, or to whatever, so for me, sometimes it's music. Last year's show, I've been wanting to use mute math forever. And I came up across a concept where the music fit. I didn't even think it fit for a minute. More often than not, it's something in the world around me, that grabs me somehow. Sometimes it's a phrase, sometimes it's interaction with somebody, something I see on TV. That's like this little tiny nugget. And I try to not go design right away. I try to go, okay, I'm just going to let it sit there and see what happens. And I'll brainstorm like really hard on it for 2 hours, but then I just brain dump any ideas that are there in no logical order. And I don't let myself go, how are we going to pay for it? How are you going to get it down the ramp? Do we have enough kids? Will this actually work? I don't let myself put up the director barriers. and then I come back to it maybe in a week or something and see if it's still, it's going to seem like a great idea when you first have it. Every idea you have is great. You got to see if it's still a great idea in like a week. So if I, and sometimes honestly, me telling somebody about it is when I start to doubt it or love it. Like a week from now, I have a few people that are sounding boards where they realize it or not. I mean, and to be honest, not all drumline guys, like one of the managers I work with, I'll just be like, hey, I'm going to bounce this off you. And he's not going to be like, oh yeah, you should do this with the quads. I mean, he's just going to, yeah, okay, seems cool. He may ask a question or two about it, but me just having to logically put it together and explain it, more often than not, and like the light bulbs will go on. And if they're not going on as I'm explaining it, then maybe it's not right, or not right now. It almost always starts concept first for me versus music. I mean, although I mean, our Matrix Open show was inspired by music. Like this year, it just happened to come from music. It just I don't have a rule. Like whatever gets me. Like whatever gets me. When it's the minute I gotta like call the other guys I design with and be like, check this out. You got to hear this. You got to see this. Or look at this image. Imagine if we did this. It's got to start with that immediate turn on. Like, what am I looking for? If I can, this is going to sound really dumb, but if I can see it in the arena, if like there's a picture in my head of how it will look in the arena, then I know I'm starting. I mean, and it doesn't mean that specific picture has to exist. But like that, if I can go that, I can see them in the arena that night. I can see what this looks like Saturday night. I can see like, there's a moment in the Matrix show that the World show, this is, the picture's kind of been in my head when this whole thing started of like, I think this is the picture. And that was enough to get me to keep going. And then it's about discovery. Like one of my other rules is you got to learn from the show. Like you can't, for me personally, I can't make all the decisions about the show from the beginning. There's some guys that are just amazing storyboarders. Tim Fairbanks, amazing story. I've been through his clinics. He's an amazing storyboarder. I've tried it. It's weird for me because I have to get myself started. I have to have an idea where the end is, and then I have to like start designing, and then I have to listen to the show and learn from it. Because more often than not, like the end is not wrong, but the pathway may be different than what I thought. And so for me, it's as I get through it, beginning to to pay attention to it and not just go, oh, but we said we're doing this, this, and this, but literally, and I don't know if it's probably not a super concrete answer. It's just literally anything, music or, I mean, and again, there's a reason why, some of the music that ends up in the Matrix shows are what it is stylistically, because that's the stuff I listen to. That's the stuff that, the Mute Mass stuff. God, I mean, I went and saw them in concert and went, I'm using this at some point. This is the way I felt when I got to do this, I mean, a lot of that. And then serve the concept. Once you lock yourself into like what it is, if you can find it, for me, if you can find an emotional connection to it, it's the hardest one. The aesthetic is easier. The intellectual is what we were going to gravitate to first, but I also think it's it's the one your audience will grab least or last. They will grab the aesthetic first. I think it's the easiest for them to grab. And I want my audience to be able to enjoy the show, even if they don't want to invest in trying to figure it out. Can they just enjoy it for what it is? Wow, it looks cool. Emotional is, I always think it's maybe one of the most powerful things, but it's the one that takes the most investment. So if it has that opportunity and you're willing to go down that road, then I think that's got to be like everything serves making that happen. Everything serves that moment where you go, oh my God. For me, that's the turn on right now, where I'm at in my life right now, designing. If we can get that moment where you go, oh my God, the whole arena goes, what? Like, that's it. That's the one that's magic.
And I think that's so well stated, just, the reality of when you're trying to pick a concept or a direction you want to go, it's got to be something that lights you on fire and gets you excited and makes you want to invest in it, both from an arrangement standpoint, but also just a producing this and working on this program and this vision. And then, if you're trying to select between a couple of different options, reaching for the one that is going to fulfill that whole triad of effect and is going to speak to the audience intellectually, aesthetically, and emotionally. Whenever you can find something that will trigger all three of those, you know you're onto something that's going to be successful. And again, I'm not talking about competitive success. I'm talking about successfully bringing an idea to life and having an important experience for the performers and also for the audience that will get to witness that.
Yeah, a show that you're going to love 5 years from now.
Yep.
You know, I mean, I guess the other piece of that, just as you listening to you say it too, is that because sometimes it is music for me or concept for me. One of the first questions I have to ask myself, and I didn't say this, is what's it look like? If I don't know what it looks like, it probably doesn't work, because our audience is more educated visually than they are musically in terms of just your audience. Just we're used to using our eyes more than we do our ears definitively, I think. So they will gravitate more to what they see, and I always say the aesthetic is the only thing that's there the entire time. Like the quad feature or the opener, that opener only lasts a minute and a half, or that quad feature lasts 20 seconds, or the whatever effect where somebody climbs on somebody and they jump over the other person, that lasts 18 seconds. What it looks like, I mean, and the floor, the costume, the way it feels, the way it makes the room feel, and the musical aesthetic. Like, what mood are we going to create in the arena? Do we want to create pandemonium? Do we want to create peace? Do we want to create excitement? Do we want to create tension? If I don't know what it looks and feels like, it's probably not the right one right then. If I know what it looks and feels like, I don't even have to know how to do it. I don't have to know how to do it. I just have to know. Like, I mean, honestly, last year's Matrix World Tour, I wanted to create a vacuum. I wanted to make the whole arena afraid to move. That was my goal. So I wanted to create a vacuum in the arena. So it's like I knew what I wanted to. I had no idea how to do it. Right. It's just like I know what I want it to feel like, and I started to know what that looked like, just aesthetically, like just the eyeball, and that's where it all started. It's just that kind of thing. And if you know that, you'll figure out how. Maybe not the first time, but you can change it. You can discard it and try over. But as long as you have that, as long as you know what you want to feel like, you know what you want it to look like, you'll eventually get it there. And then you're going to feel good when you're done, because you had that that guidepost that kind of you kept coming back to.
Yep. Hey, Rob, I think we've got one more question, unless any others come in here in the next couple minutes. Tyree sent this one in, and it has to do with sounds and voice samples. So this is what Tyree is wondering. When you write an original show dealing with sounds and voice samples, where do you go to get good stuff? Are there any tricks to the trade that you might be able to share today?
Yeah, I go to Evan Brown. I'm fortunate. I mean, I've got like a guy who's just a monster in my back pocket, who's like, I mean, Evan is on every project I'm in, indoors or outdoors. It's like I have to be able to use Sibelius, and I have to be able to use Evan Brown. So, I mean, I'm very fortunate. I don't do my own sound design. And it's something where I love that world. I have an electronic background, an audio background in a previous life, but I do a lot of like singing on the phone to him, or we do a video call at times where I'm like, it's got to go, it's got to, or I'll write like canyon pings, and he'll be like, what is canyon pings? And so like, but it reminds me what I was thinking, I mean, it's like these stupid, random, but for me, I hear like a lot of the what I would call like one-shot samples. That's just a slang term that Evan and I would use, like bass drops or explosions or like whoosh kind of things. That's the stuff that like I'll sketch in sometimes, or I'll be singing to him. I'm very fortunate. He'll go put an entire like ambient layer underneath things that I would say, like, if you can really hear it, it's probably too loud. But the minute it's gone, you're like, oh, something's missing. That's like the sauce, He'll do that, just kind of autopilot. Vocals, as anybody knows me knows, I have no fear of vocal samples. I probably have a bit of an addiction to vocal samples. Voiceovers, I'll do my own voiceover. I'll write my own voiceovers, and then a lot of times Evan will mock them up so we can hear them. He's got a very documentary voice. And then we'll go out and seek the specific, like this today was like, we need a young girl sound for this, or, he'll mock it up just so we can hear it pacing wise. But I'll say it myself like 10 times to get it to go, okay, if we start it here and we say it like this, it lands right before the vibe center. So I'm very specific about like the words we try to use in voiceovers. Because I think it's huge. If that's for your message, it's so important. Vocals, out of tunes, if we're not composing, if we're arranging, I haven't gotten to like writing my own vocals in a composition, and it's one of those things that's like I keep going, man, I would love to do it, and then every time I start to do it, man, I don't know if I'm ready to be a pop star yet. So I haven't had the courage to do it. Although it's something I would love to do. I have a couple vocal artists that we have access to, which is awesome. A couple females that are great, two guys that are really great. So we have some people already that we can get to, and I know what their voices sound like. So now and then it's like, hey, this would be perfect if this person did it. So we'll take a tune that already exists, and then we'll have it recorded by somebody else. It changes the mood completely, like completely. If you've got a guy who like has more of a folky sound to his voice, one of our guys does, it changes. Like a girl, one of our girls, our female vocalist is like a jazz singer, kind of like a smoky jazz voice, and it's like she can just take the mood of something that's kind of heavy. I'm doing it with Selena Gomez tune right now, where Selena's voice is so powerful, and the tune is kind of like in your face, but we re-record it with kind of a smokier vibe, and the whole mood of it all changes. That's a big turn on for me, if we can take something and it's like our version of remix,
Yep.
So, but yeah, the vocal thing is a massive turn on for me. I have to get myself to not use too many words, because I stick to human voices. I mean, it's so easy for us to emotionally be attached to that.
Absolutely. And Tyree, if you're looking for to get even deeper into this, I know it's one of the things that Rob and a couple of other resident experts in the activity touched on in the Top Secrets series. Those are available on the WGI website. If you go check out the store, really all three of the ones that we did on electronics would be great, because all of these guys kind of shared their go-to spots, their go-to resources, and kind of their techniques behind the scenes. So for just a couple of bucks, you can go grab that and get all the secret sauce there. But I appreciate, Rob, you kind of touching on that again for Tyree tonight. All right, Rob, I think we're going to kind of wrap it up here. Before we depart, though, there is one thing you and I were talking about when we were trading some emails and stuff like that, and that was kind of your whole take on timeline, development, education, not getting sidetracked throughout the season. I thought it was brilliant. So I would love, if you're willing, for you to kind of share that message with everybody that's tuning in tonight. If you are hanging out with us tonight, definitely check this part out, because I think what Rob has to say is a game changer for a lot of us. So Rob, take it away.
Yeah, this comes from problems that I had, as most of the successes come from previous problems. But we live in an activity that is, a finite timeline. We're all starting roughly the same time. When it comes to, getting our kids in indoor mode, we've all got marching band, and we're going out of that. We have a limited time. We have a definitive end of the season. We have a definitive, like, we've got this many minutes to work with. We got to get on the floor, we got to get off the floor, all those things. And then we've got this competitive thing that I think is cool, but I think it's also distracting. Not at the end, it's distracting sometimes in the middle. I think at the beginning, we sit down and we have an idea. We know, and again, like we talked earlier, we know what we want it to look like. We know what we want it to sound like. We know what it to feel like. Just global. We don't know all the components. We don't know how many sets it's going to be. We don't know exactly what color the drums are going to be, whatever. But we know what it is. And then we start to, that image just to become clear, and we devote a tremendous amount of ourselves into what we want it to be. And then we get into shows. So we go to our first show. We have a show every 2 weeks. So we have whatever. I found myself a number of times, especially, I can say when I was younger, but it wasn't that long ago. It was when I was already old. Where I would, we'd go to, like, for me, it was Dayton Regional, because it's early. Dayton Regional is one of the earliest regionals in the year recently. And I go to Dayton Regional, and we know, like, in our mode of production, we put it on, we produce as we go. So we go to the Dayton Regional, and we've got let's say with the World Group, we've got 4 minutes on. With our Source Classic Group, we have like 3 minutes on. And the show doesn't totally make sense at that point. Especially trying to get the aha moment to fit at the right point of the show. I remember going to the region a couple of years ago, and they're going, so why does it say that on the floor? It doesn't make any sense. And it didn't make any sense right then with the part they were seeing. It didn't make any sense. It wasn't going to make sense till about 35 more seconds. We could have put that 35 more seconds on, and our kids would have been less successful. who knows, they might have been more competitively successful at that moment in time, but they would have been hanging on for dear life. We would have thrown some stuff on that we eventually were going to change later, just to make sure that the show made more sense that day for that show. And it would have skewed our timeline. Or vice versa. I go to that show and I stick with the 4 minutes I have, and then a judge goes, I think you should change the title of your show. Because it's a conversation I literally had at an early show for this year I'm thinking about with a judge I have immense respect for, that he was like, Rob, you should call your show this. Do I let it sidetrack me? Do I let it skew my journey for where I want to go? If my goal was my kids just learning to play better, and we're going to go to the regional to just see other groups for the first time, and just go through that experience. And we don't care about making finals of the regional. We can't suddenly, like the week of, go, man, we really got to make finals. We all do it. We're all going to want to, we all want in that moment to be successful right then. But sometimes we're detouring, and I found myself chasing the little red ball sometimes. And by the time you're done, no one person is going to have a better sense of what it needs to be than you are. And when it's all done, the most invested judges, and I'm fortunate that I feel like the WGI judging community is, in my opinion, is as good as it gets. And we can say whatever we want. I mean, it's not perfect, and those guys aren't perfect. And I'll be more than happy to tell them I don't agree sometimes. That's fine. But God, man, they're good and they're invested. And the best judges, and I'm fortunate to call those guys friends, the best judges are going to invest in the Matrix show for 7 minutes, 7.5 minutes. They're going to give me everything they got, everything they got. And that's 7.5 minutes. And I've been invested for 8.5 months. There's no way in that 7.5 minutes that everything they give me, I should take completely as I need to do this. And they're not meaning it that way. And if I'm not careful, I let that reaction shift me off path. My advice is know where you want to go. Write it down, maybe put it on a sticky note, put it above your computer, because you're going to forget. You're going to forget. I'm not saying don't let the path of your show ever change, because I told earlier, I think you got to live with it, and you have this epiphany of oh my God, we could do this thing, and it'd be, yes, but that's your epiphany. That's not, and use your judges. I could go through specific names and go, when I see this guy, I know what I want from this guy. There's one of the effective music judges in this country, balance. The things I'm going to take. There's tons of great information, but I'm going to take balance from him. There's another one. It's every word with the spoken word and the vocals and that, he's going to be so in tune to where it was and if it was the right word and do you really need it, and use those guys. I generally go, if I'm going to the regional, I see the panel. I know the panel for Indy next weekend, right? I know each of those guys, in the show I have, I know the questions I have for this guy. Okay, do you feel this? Do you feel this? Did this make sense? And there's not the same question for every guy, even in the same caption. I know there are everybody has natural strengths and what I want to get from them. If I'm going to bring, Caleb, I'm going to bring you into my program. You're a great mind. You've been doing this activity forever. I'm going to bring you in to Matrix Open and say, hey, Caleb, I want you to consult for Matrix Open. I'm not just going to go, here, do whatever you want with the show. I'm going to say, hey, man, I really want you to look at the intellectual pathway from beginning to end and how all the things connect. Can you just look at the horizontal? Don't get caught up in vertical moments and stuff, because from my experience with you, that's the thing. You could do all kinds of things, but the biggest bang for the buck of you in my rehearsal for 7.5 minutes or 7.5 hours is going to be horizontal. That's what I want from Caleb Rossi. And if I bring Chris Heston in, I'm going to get something else or something different with Chris. If I'm going to bring Frank Miller in, it's different. It's a different thing. And use them to get you closer to where you want to be. Use the timeline to motivate you to get what you said you were going to have done by that show done. Not more, not less. So by Indy, we're going to have the ending on, but we don't care if the transition to the closer is completely produced. We don't have to have, we want it to be done. We don't care if the last thing is completely sculpted. I can't this weekend be oh my God, we have to sculpt the last thing. No. I said that we were going to get this and this. And then if we go to the regional, and I joke with, I'll use Frank Miller because Frank and I had this conversation a couple years ago. He saw a show and he's like, I loved the opener, and you got to part 2 and it was just not quite as developed. But and then part 3, you're just marching around. And I said, so Frank, you love what it is we love? He goes, yeah. And I said, you like what it is we like, but we don't love yet. He's like, yes. And I said, and then you don't like the stuff that we are just kind of hanging on for dear life and aren't done with yet. He's like, yes. I said, then we're good. So I got all the questions I knew I answered right. I got the questions that I guessed and thought might be right. I got some of them right. And all the questions I didn't answer, I got wrong. Okay, I'm fine. And it took me a lot of years. And I'm still not good at it. There are still Sunday nights where I am off track, and I've got friends who will talk me back on the, I mean, you probably have, Caleb, I know.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
But, you know what I mean? Because we care, because we're passionate. But the reality is using that, and then you're going to find yourself Monday of WGI week, not Saturday or Friday, Monday of WGI week. You're going to find yourself going, yeah, this is it. You know, I have a couple times recently been in a rehearsal Monday, Tuesday, even Wednesday, whatever, with one of my teams going to Worlds going, I don't need to go to Worlds. Like, I mean, if we're done right now, I mean, I'd say to kids, like, if we're done right now, if we said we're done, are you good with it? And they'd be like, yeah. Yeah. I mean, in our own gym, you know, we didn't have to worry about the lots and weather, and just in our own gym, we put the uniform on. We just do this one more time for our friends and family, and pizza and done. Are we done with the journey? Are we done with the project? And they'll go, yeah. Then cool. Then we'll go down there and let it be about the experience of that moment, which is cool. That those arenas, that audience, the energy, all that, which is awesome. But we got to be done before we get there. We can't let that be what finishes it for us, because the chance of it all working out exactly. I mean, there's too many things. You know, there's too many things. We have to know that it's done before that. You know, it's nice to see the show in the arena. It's like, that's the best part, is like the black curtain and the aesthetic and the energy in the room. But so just that part, you mean? Just that part. That's the part that we should need from Dayton at the end, is the energy that the audience gives us, because that's pretty special, you know. But I mean, honestly, the last thing I'll say is, it's the text that I'll send to some of the judges that I know after they're done judging us. It's the prelims night, you know, like, we know that panel's not going to see us the rest of the weekend. And I've sent texts to the guys I know specifically. I would say, it's great having you with us tonight. That's what I mean. Like, I'm not going to listen to your tape probably. I mean, no offense at the end, because I'll listen to all those tapes later. Like, you know what I mean? Sometimes on the drive home, or like a month later. But I'm not going to listen to them necessarily, not because I don't care what they say, but at that point, I'm comfortable with it. I don't want to talk myself out of being comfortable with it, you know, because it's like, it's really cool having them there, like knowing they shared that with us that night, that they got to be there in it with us, meant the world. And so, and then it is what it is. And, you know, it's like the spreads, do what you got to do. You have a job you got to do. We're going to do the job we had to do. And if we feel good, we feel good. If you did your job as a judge and you feel good, and high fives, and, you know, and I'm not going to lie, that it's been only in the past handful of years, but I felt myself enjoy it more in the past couple of years at the end, and not be relying on somebody else to tell me if I should feel good. So.
Absolutely. That is so well stated, and such great advice. I know I kind of went through a similar journey. I think it takes many of us a long time to get through that. The more you can accelerate that process and be about your vision and your production and your students, and let the other stuff help you guide you towards what you want, the more successful you're going to be in this activity, the more fulfilled you're going to be at the end of all these things. So Rob, thank you so much for articulating that so eloquently for everybody. Rob, and I also want to thank you very much for spending some time with us here tonight and chatting about all things indoor. I love it. You're great. And I hope everybody got a whole lot out of this. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate the invite.
Absolutely. All right, everybody, we are going to wrap this one up. Our next webinar is scheduled for March 22nd. We hope that you will join us for that. John Campese from Infinity will be our special guest that evening. That's going to be a great conversation. We'll touch on some of the same topics that we talked about tonight in terms of how do you manage a crazy independent percussion ensemble, but also get his perspective on the activity. Yeah.
Or 3. Yeah.
Yep. Times 3. So it's going to be great. So everybody, thank you very much for coming and checking us out and hanging out with us tonight. And we'll see you again on March 22nd. Thanks, everybody.